When Bob Hayes and his wife Melissa relocated to East Texas, it seemed like the promise of peace. Years of city living had them yearning for quiet nights and open skies, a place where their 8-year-old daughter, Grace, could grow up being surrounded by nature instead of noise. The new home, a worn wooden house between tall pines, was at the end of a short gravel drive. The house stretched on into deep woods that whispered even in quiet air. In their first night, while sun sets between the trees, Melissa unpacked boxes and Grace played at the window. Bob came in with rolled-up sleeves and grinned. "You okay with this place?" he asked. "I am," Melissa said. "It feels honest good," Bob replied. "Just don't let the woods spook you." "Sometimes they play tricks," she laughed, brushing the thought aside. That night after dinner, the crickets sang loud, and the air smelled of cedar and damp earth. Melissa thought it was perfect, almost too perfect. The first night had been uneventful until, barely past midnight, Melissa awoke to the rustling of wind in the trees. She rolled over half asleep when she heard a soft voice calling from down the corridor. "Mama?" Grace stood in the doorway, ghostly pale and shaking. "What is it, sweetie?" "I heard someone whispering outside my window," Grace explained, wide-eyed. "It said, 'Help me.'" Melissa shivered but tried to smile. "It's probably just the wind," she said. "Houses like this creak." She took Grace to the kitchen for a drink. When she poured a glass, she thought she heard it too. A faint, wavering whisper from outside the back door. "Help me." She stood stock still. The whisper was gone. She shook her head, telling herself it was nothing, and took Grace back to bed. The following morning at breakfast, the whisper was again brought up by Grace. Bob scowled but brushed it off. Out here, all things creak, trees, coyotes, the house settling. Still, the discomfort persisted. At the kitchen window, Melissa observed their old neighbor, Mr. Ellis, strolling his land with a cane, his head directed toward their woods. That afternoon, Melissa took a jar of peach preserves to Mr. Ellis's porch as a welcome gesture. The old man smiled warmly and invited her to sit. His house was older than theirs, seasoned but strong. "You folks done good choosing this place," he said, rocking slowly. "Quiet land, but quiet don't always mean peace." Melissa cocked her head. "What do you mean?" "The woods," he stated, voice low. "They recall things. Folks too. Ever hear something you can't account for, don't disregard it. Sometimes the earth attempts to answer back." Melissa pasted on a polite smile, disturbed. "We heard something last night?" "Most likely nothing." Mr. Ellis nodded knowingly. "Perhaps. But 20 years ago, a young woman disappeared out there. Never did find her. They said she was lost hiking, but the woods don't lose people. Keep 'em." He gave her an old newspaper clipping before letting her go. The headline had faded. "Local woman Sarah Martinez, missing, 1998. That evening, Melissa stayed up reading the article, her skin crawling with discomfort. The wind picked up again that evening. Melissa stayed up listening. Then again came the whisper, closer this time, directly outside the window. "Help me. Help me." She sat up, her heart racing. The front door groaned open downstairs. Barefoot, she stole through the darkening hall, flashlight shaking in her hand. The door was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. "Hello?" she spoke. "Is anyone there?" No reply. Only the buzzing of insects and the sound of pine needles rustling. Then she heard it again, but this time more in the distance from the forest. She moved off the porch, tracking the sound until her light picked up an old rusty sign. "Private property. Keep out." Below it, light footprints led into the forest. A gust of cold wind shook the trees, and she thought she glimpsed a figure dart between the trunks. Melissa dashed back to the house, slamming the door shut. "Bob," she whispered, shaking him awake. "Something's outside." "I've seen prints." He groggily opened one eye. "We'll check tomorrow," he said. But Melissa hardly slept. Melissa and Bob went out at dawn with flashlights, leaving Mr. Ellis and Grace behind. They tracked the prints across dew-drenched grass to the remains of an ancient cabin nestled in a stand of oaks. The door was on one hinge, and there was a rusted bed frame, shattered jars, and the carved signature in the wood. Sarah M., 1998. Melissa stiffened. "That's her," she said. "The missing woman." Bob looked at the ground. "There's been someone here fairly recently." A twig cracked outside. They turned sharply, but only saw bare trees. The air was thick, observing. They rushed home with shivers. Back home, Grace was at the living room window, white as chalk.
"Mama," she whispered.
The woman is standing at the edge of the woods. Melissa turned and glimpsed a tall figure, still and shadowed, watching from between the pines. Then it vanished. Bob grabbed his jacket. "I'm setting up cameras," he said grimly. "Whatever this is, we'll catch it." By morning, Bob reviewed the footage. On the screen, a grainy figure wandered near their porch around 2:30 a.m., paused to look inside, and drifted away toward the trees. The face was indistinct, blurred, almost melted. Melissa's hand trembled. "That's her," Bob nodded. "It's the direction of the cabin." They brought the videotape to Mr. Ellis, who opened his door before they knocked. "I told you," he breathed. "The land remembers. What does she want?" Melissa asked. He breathed heavily. "Sarah never went away. They looked for her in the woods, but the earth swallowed her up. When storm fronts come through and the wind shifts, she roams, searching for someone to listen." The words hung in Melissa's heart. There was something about the tone of the voice that haunted her. It did not sound threatening. It sounded grief. The wind howled that night. Trees creaked and swayed under the rumble of thunder in the woods. The electricity began to flicker. Grace screamed from her bedroom. Melissa rushed to her, but the door shut hard behind her the moment she stepped inside. She turned the knob, it would not move. Grace grasped her mother, staring at something invisible. "The woman," Grace wept. "She's in here." The whisper poured into the air once more, louder, layered. "Help me. Help me." Bob slammed the door open, splintering the frame. He grabbed Grace as the lights went out entirely. Shadow crept in the hallway, tall, long-haired, rain-soaked, its footsteps silent. "Get in the kitchen," Bob yelled. They barred the door and cowered together. The front door slammed open with a bang, and rain swept across the floorboards. In the doorway stood the figure, immobile. Lightning flared, and vacant sockets where eyes would be, and a name etched thinly into the collarbone. Sarah M. Her lips parted, but no voice issued, only 1,000 hissing voices on the wind. Bob moved forward cautiously, trembling. "You need help? We'll help you, but you can't harm us." The figure cocked her head. Then, for an instant, Melissa saw sadness cross the face, like recognition. The figure turned and backed slowly into the rain, disappearing with the storm. The whisper came for the final time, soft this time. "Thank you." By morning, the storm had broken. The air was crisp, clean with pine and damp earth. Deputies trudged the woods, reopening the case now 20 years old. Under the fallen rubble of the cabin, they discovered bones, long hidden but clearly human. A locket rested next to them, the initials SM etched on the inside. Melissa grasped Grace's hand as they stood at the clearing's edge. "Will she be okay now?" Grace spoke softly. "I believe she just required someone to listen," Melissa stated. "She can now rest." Mr. Ellis came to stand on his porch, hand in hat. "You did well," he stated. "The land'll rest as well." Melissa gazed out over the trees, their branches gently swaying. Somewhere in that movement, she believed she heard a sigh. Neither breath nor voice, only the sound of peace returning to the woods. They had traveled to East Texas in pursuit of silence. What they discovered instead is that silence is never empty. The earth remembers, and the wind whispers the voices of those who never departed. Melissa would never again confuse the trees rustling for simply noise. It was the voice of the earth, and on certain nights, if you listened closely enough, you could still hear the whisper, "Help me."